everyone. I wanted to make a quick little video on understanding the baseline grid. So you've probably created a baseline grid when you were in DES 105, and it might have been a while since you've created a baseline grid since then. And you might have been a little bit confused as to why you were creating a baseline grid or what it really means. So the way you want to think about the baseline grid is it's like the lines on paper, on notebook paper, and you're creating those lines. And the way that you set up your grid is how much space you want to give between those lines. So let's look at our assignment or our assessment for this week really quick. So you can see that our body copy needs to be 10-point type over 14-point leading. So that's why we are going to set up a baseline grid that is set at 14 points because that is the increment between the lines. So let's very quickly just set up a baseline grid. Look at our Times New Roman. At 10-point type over 14-point. And so you can see that this is 10-point type over 14-point. So when I create my baseline grid, I will be able to take this text box and lay it right over those lines. So to create the baseline grid, you need to go up into the actual InDesign settings as opposed to the document settings. So we're going to click on the word InDesign and we're going to go to our preferences and we're going to go down to units and increment or grids, sorry, and baseline grid. Now, you either want to start it at 0 or 0.5 relative to the top of the page or relative to the top of the margin. And for this one, we're going to set it to the top of the page and 14-point increments. And where the start line is, that has to do with your margin. So again, we have a 0.5 point or 0.5 margin. So we're going to start it at 0.5 here. If we had, say, a 0.25 margin, we would start it at 0.25, just to kind of give you an idea. We want the increment to be at 14 points and the view threshold to be at 50%. This just makes it easier to see. Now, you may want to change the color of your baseline grid depending on, how good or bad your eyes are. My eyes are kind of bad. So sometimes I like to change it to dark blue and then uncheck grids and back because what that does is it actually puts the grid behind your document and you can't see it. And then click OK. If it still does not show up when you are zoomed in like this, you then need to go into your document settings. So go to View, go to Grids and Guides, and make sure Show Baseline Grid is checked. So now you can see. So when I take this text box and lay it over and move the text down, you can see how it lays at the grid because this is 10-point over 14-point type. And every time I add another line at this point, it will sit on the grid. But I don't have any character styles set up. So I can move this text box around and it's not going to snap to my grid. This is where your styles are going to come into play and everything is going to work together to ensure that your text lays on the grid. So let's open up our styles. So you want to go to Window, Styles, and go to Paragraph Styles. And we're going to create a new style right down here. And you'll see it says Paragraph Style 1. Double click a little bit off to the left-hand side and rename it Body. Under your basic character formats, you want it to be Times New Roman, 10 point over 14 point. And when we get to indents and spacing, you want to tell it to align all lines to your grid and hit OK. So now click on your text box that you've made and attach that body style and look at what it does. It puts your text on your baseline grid. So even if I move my text box around, it's always going to click and keep that text to the grid.